things that you guys can kind of have a starting point and then adapt and evolve accordingly. If any of these tips don't work for you explicitly, that's fine. I'm hoping I can give you some general tips and knowledge so that you can, just kind of play around with this because I'm gonna be honest with you, like every single person who photographs their minis is going to be a little different and they're going to have a different approach. They're going to have a different take. And it's kind of hard to say like, well, you're doing it wrong when like their photos look excellent, right? The main thing with the photography portion of all of miniatures is we're trying to get the colors and the lighting as accurate as we can. Do not be afraid of doing any type of editing. That's a huge thing. Now, within reason, obviously, when we start getting into the like enhancing Photoshop and we're screwing around with, like ultra saturation and things like that, like that's where things start to get into that little gray area of like, dude, did you even paint this? But like, honestly, you do you. I don't care. I just want you guys to be able to take some good photos because one of the biggest killers, in my opinion, is you're trying to showcase the stuff online, whether it's on Discord, whether it's on Instagram, or even just to a friend, and you pull out your phone to go show them, and you go, "Well, I promise this looks better in person." Like I can almost guarantee you, every single one of you has had something like that, like a moment like that, where you're like, "Well, it looks way different in person. It's much better." You just have to see it, right? We want to try to be able to capture it as best as we could, as best as we can, so that when they inevitably see it in person, it's just that much better because it's like, oh wow, you actually did the thing, which is fantastic. It's fun. All right, so let's get the kind of elephant in the room. I'm going to be focused very much exclusively on a real camera, and I say real in parentheses that nobody can see. um, Mostly I'm looking like at a DSLR, a mirrorless type camera, just because you're going to get a lot more control. You have way more access to customizable settings, and you can even invest in different styles and types of lenses to just capture details a little bit better. We've got a large variety of equipment out there because photography is its own hobby and it's its own profession, and you're going to have a lot of different options and a lot of different things available to you. But that being said, like I will cover just very briefly a little bit about using like your phone. My professor in college, I had to take a minor in visual media. One of the part was a section was of photography, and she said her favorite camera was her iPhone because she always has it on her, and she's got like a half a dozen, $4,000 plus camera bodies with tens of thousands of dollars worth of lenses. But her favorite was her iPhone because it's there and it's available, right? So the biggest thing with these real big cameras, full cameras, proper cameras, whatever you want to call them, is that you're going to get a lot of control. You've got every single setting under the sun. And you have these swappable lenses to get better, sharper detail. Touching on the customizable settings portion of it, there are apps within. I can only speak to iPhone because that's just what I currently have. But I know Android will probably have something like that as well, where you can actually adjust and switch settings like the ISO or shutter speed or anything like that. So I would encourage you, if you're saying, hey, camera's not in the cards, I want to just try to do my iPhone, that would be something to explore. I wish I had some recommendations in regards to like a camera app. I don't use one, so I just don't have any strict recommendations, but I have seen plenty of people use those types of apps and stuff. So they're out there. It just takes a little bit of searching. Okay, so I want to talk to you guys about f-stop or aperture, okay? So people will say like, oh, well, what's your f-stop and like aperture and things. And it's like, what does this all mean? Basically, it just has to do with the dilation, right? Imagine your eyes dilating when you go from a dark room to a light area or vice versa, right? Your eyes are going to open or shrink accordingly to make it a larger aperture, means it's more dilated, or a smaller aperture, which means it's closed more. Yeah, it's more closed. It's like a tighter. And it's just that's going to allow more or less light in. Just some quick little rule of thumbs. Uh, Pretty typically, the lower the number, the tighter the aperture, which means you're going to get less light. Okay. The higher the number, the wider the aperture, you're going to get more light. Right. General rule of thumb here. Um, Typically, we want to try to capture as much of the what's called depth of field and detail. That's just how the camera and how the actual aperture, the eye of the camera is capturing the specific details. I'm sure you guys have probably seen like those portraitures that they're some of them are absolutely stunning, and they have like this really insane focal point where like it maybe is just capturing like the top portion of the person's up like the upper lip, nose, and eyes, and then everything else starts to kind of blur away. So that would be a shallow depth of field, a shallow focus. Okay, that is not ideal. Um, for miniature photography because I mean, unless you're trying to do like super focus on like one particular area or something like that, for like a general like shot or a general photo of like, hey, check this out. We want to have every bit of it in as much focus as possible. Where we want to like focus in that depth of field is probably going to be your focal point of like for most things, 90% of the things, there's probably going to be like the face, the upper chest and face. If things start to kind of blur out a little bit beyond that, it's not the worst thing in the world. But we kind of want to keep that into consideration. So a big, this is like for miniatures rule of thumb is to start at the f-stop of 18 through 25, right? That just has to do with how much light is being allowed um, through the actual like lens, through the eye, and that's going to give you a really good depth of field. Right now, the drawback with that though is that you are allowing a lot of light in, so we have to kind of compensate for all these things. And like I said, this is my particular approach for doing this. Some people might have a little slightly different approach and stuff. I encourage you to just kind of play. I think starting at around like f-stop about 18 and then bumping up from there is a really good range for you to just kind of explore. Some people may not necessarily have exactly 18, maybe it's more like 14, but like that's kind of like a general rule right there. Does anybody have any questions in regards to aperture? This is a really good little scale to just kind of kind of keep in your back pocket. Honestly, you could Google it, aperture scale. It's a really good thing so that you can, as you're playing around with these images, you can see what it's actually going to do and stuff. Now, does anybody have any questions in regards to aperture? Cool. All right. Well, like we know, the cake is a lie. Okay, so now we're gonna go on to shutter speed. All right. I love this little graphic right here, where we've got the little tick marks right here, which is commonly associated right here, like these little tick marks, commonly associated with like inch when we're measuring. In the camera settings, it stands for second. So as you start kind of getting beyond 1/15 of a second, an eighth of a second, and you start going down, now you're going to start seeing like 0.5 of these little tick marks. It just starts talking about half a second to 3 seconds. When you have your aperture open, when you have it nice and open right here, it's allowing a lot of light in to allow a lot of depth of field and detail. As a result, if you have your shutter speed like really, 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 really open, it's going to let too much light in. So we have to kind of find a little bit of a balance with all of this. Okay. Now, these rules are not necessarily hard and fast, because if you are taking a camera and doing some like landscaping or environmental shooting, or going into the city or something like that, all of this stuff shifts and changes depending upon what you're trying to capture. If you're wanting to capture something going really, really fast, right, we want to have a nice high shutter speed, so 1,000th of a second, right? typically with what we're doing, everything's going to be stationary. So ideally, we really want to have we can get away with a lot more of an open shutter speed, and we can find a good happy medium. I don't like to do any extremes for the most part on either shutter speed or aperture. So I don't typically put my aperture to the most open it can possibly be, and I don't put my shutter speed to the slowest it could possibly be. Right? I try to find a happy medium in here. General rule is shutter speed. It basically is like your blink. It's the camera going that doing that kind of uh, motion and stuff, right? The slower your shutter speed, more light it lets in. The faster, less light. It captures motion a little bit easier the faster your shutter speed goes. Now, there is a bit of a caveat with all this. We need to have a tripod. Okay. If we're going to mess around with putting our shutter speed typically lower than a hundredth is when we start to see evidence of handshaking. Some people can be real steady. I mean, we're miniature painters, we probably can get pretty steady, but once we start getting into like this 160th, especially in the like 140, 150th or 30th, I mean, we really start seeing lots of blur. Okay, so do yourself a favor, get yourself a decent tripod, and we can actually later on I can send you a couple of uh, we can add in a couple of links to the tripods that I really like. In photography, you'll hear people talk about how like, oh, you need to spend $300 on a steel tripod. No, forget all that. You don't need all that. But what you do need is you do need some adjustability with it, so that way you can adjust the height, you can adjust the twisting from on its x-axis, on its z-axis, on its y-axis, and it gives you a lot more capability. It makes it a little bit more straightforward. It does. They will spend. You will spend a little bit more money on those types of tripods. We're talking between 45 to $100 if you're wanting to go real fancy with it. I think mine was about $60, give or take. So you don't really need a whole lot with this setup. And because you are going to be ideally taking photos in the same, if not a very similar position, you can kind of have chunks of it set up already, so you don't have to keep fiddling with it every time. Now, I know space can always be an issue. I mean, I started my hobby experience on a TV tray, so I had to tear things down, pack things up constantly. So I totally get where everyone's going to be at. Does anyone have any questions in regards to shutter speed? Sweet. So yeah, the slower that we have it, meaning these numbers right here get lower and lower and lower until they start becoming full numbers instead of like fractions. We're going to allow more light in. The slower we get, we needed to have a tripod. General rule of thumb for all of this: about a half a second to 3 seconds, you're going to get some pretty good open lighting with good sharp details. You're not going to necessarily blow your photo out too much. If you need to do it handheld, though, we need to stay in this shutter speed. I would highly recommend getting even something as simple as like an Amazon tripod that can clamp, or like a clamp attachment or something like that. It's just going to be that much simpler for you to play around with all of this. Like I said, I started on a TV tray and kind of graduated, if you will, to a slightly bigger desk and bigger desk. And then I built my own desk. And now I have just this tiny little nook, which is amazing, where I can keep my photo set up pretty much set up all the time. And that means that I can have minimal adjustments. I don't have to worry about like, oh, I got to break out the camera and I got to set up the tripod. I got to get the light going. Got to do this, got to do that. Luckily, it's all there for me. So that would be fantastic for any of you guys to kind of build towards. If you're trying to do any type of competition painting or submit anything online, especially if you're considering getting into like the Patreon space, or you're wanting to, do more like social media influencing and stuff, like having good photography and good lighting and things like that is pretty paramount. All right. there is a bit of a triangle here. It's a love triangle. The last one is ISO. Okay. Um, I I would encourage you, if you're interested about ISO, to look it up, to like what it properly is and to explain it. I understand it, but like the best way I can kind of dumb it down is it adds more light or less light depending upon your scale. But the higher your ISO goes, the more visual quote unquote noise that you're going to get in there. Okay. Um, for miniatures, usually because I'm heavily controlling the light, I'm usually keeping my ISO around 100. Um, Again, that can shift and change, but once we start getting beyond this 400 value, that's when we start introducing more and more noise. It's really, really good to bump up your ISO for really dark photography scenes. It's just not really good for this. And if you do all of your photography setup, and that's really the biggest thing, right? Your setup. If you do all of it correct or within ballpark, you really shouldn't be needing to mess around with the ISO beyond this. See what works for you. The best way you can kind of see if it has more visual noise is in. I mean, you could do it in your phone too. I usually will do it in my computer because I could really get in there and zoom. You can see it starts to just, you basically have like these little dots, like almost like the pixels become like blurred and stuff. You have these little dots all throughout within the pixels and such. That just means that your noise level, your ISO is a little too high. So that's something to just keep in mind. So we've got this love triangle here between f-stop, shutter speed, and ISO. Okay. Each one of them interact with each other in similar and inverted ways. Meaning, inverted meaning like if your aperture tends to be more open, you may want to close your shutter speed a little bit more. If you've got a really, really open shutter speed, you can close your f-stop a little bit. And then the ISO is kind of like the icing on the cake, is what my photo professor used to say. And then from here, you can kind of adjust and dial it as needed. Okay. These are all three of these tools right here. They're designed to get your exposure in the ballpark. All exposure is just how bright or dark the whole situation is, right? If any of you guys have ever played around with Photoshop or Lightroom or even just the editing function in your photos on your smartphone and stuff, there will be one of the very first things is usually exposure. It is different than brightness. It is different than shadows and things like that. Um, but these are going to like help dial in your exposure. This is going to get your best depth of field, your sharpness, the light, everything is going to be handled here. And then from there, you can utilize editing software. Well, I want to bump up the brightness just a little bit. I couldn't quite color correct this the greatest, so I'm gonna bump my saturation up, or maybe it's too saturated. It doesn't quite look like that in person. I'm gonna bump it down just a little bit. All we're looking for is just a little bit more accurate. All right, now before we start diving into, I think the best part and the most crucial part is, I'm gonna have any questions in regards to these three key functions for your camera.
So these are all settings in the camera when we take the photo, not alter it after we've taken the photo.
Correct. That's a great question. This is, if you have a proper camera, I typically like to use the eye diopter when I'm taking the photo, because I'm literally just seeing with my eye through the lens. However, to see instant feedback utilizing the screen and making these adjustments, scroll up, scroll down, right? When we go over into f-stop, for example, well, what is it going to look like? And it will actually give you real time, because the actual aperture itself is dilating or not. And you can kind of see what's going to work for you. So all of this stuff is done before you ever even press the camera button, right? To actually snap a shot. All of these things, in my opinion, These are the things that I think everybody should take care with learning on how to do it, with, whatever um, amount of depth that you want to kind of dive into. But these are the most important settings before you ever even click the shot, right? These are the things that you want to just play around with, see what you like, what you don't like. Um, One little tip too with each one of these right here is pretty much all cameras have a timer function. Okay. If you are, and chances are pretty good we will, because I'll explore a little bit about my camera settings that I like to use. If we're in this range right here with the shutter speed, even though you have it on a tripod, if you're pressing that button and you don't press it perfectly smooth, it's going to have shake because you're going to have a bit of a residual amount of like, oh, as you're trying to get it to like focus in and everything like that. So I typically put everything on like a 1 or 2 second timer, whatever my default is for the timer. That way I get it just where I want it. Press and hold, click it. It will go like, it'll count down 1, 2, it'll click. And that way I'll have a nice, still, and sharp photo. Any other questions?
There's one in chat from Voodoo Fairy. How do these 3 affect the depth of field?
So the biggest thing that's affecting the depth of field is the f-stop, is the main, I guess we would call it the captain of the whole thing. Okay. And then these are like, the the co-pilot and like the engineer, right? How we can kind of describe it. When you have them all 3 in like this little trifecta, it's never going to be an even amount, right? You're going to have to go, like a wider aperture to allow more light in to get a better depth of field, or sorry, a narrow aperture, I'm sorry, to get a better depth of field. But then what you're doing is like, cool, I'm allowing the camera to focus on each individual spot of my model. Now we scroll down to the shutter speed, and now we go, okay, now we need to compensate and allow more or less light accordingly. Typically, it's an inverted proportion here. When you have high shutter speed, typically you want to have a larger aperture. If you have a tighter aperture, we want to have a slower shutter speed. Man, my brain. And so doing those will allow you to get everything into as much focus as possible. Then the icing on the cake with the ISO can help compensate if your lighting isn't quite as good as it could be. Then you can kind of bump it up from the 100 to 200, and you notice that it gives you just a little bit more light without sacrificing too much noise and information. We can even bump it up to 400 to compensate for all of that. And that's just going to add a little bit more, kind of noise information, but you're going to be able to capture things a little bit more easily, and everything should be in a decent amount of focus. Great questions. Going once, going twice. We're going to move on. All right. There's 1,001 ways to do this. Okay. I don't care if you use a light box, if you just use lamps. But the biggest thing, I would say this is probably the most important above everything else. But the biggest thing is we want our light to be diffused. And all diffused is that it isn't super harsh or sharp. It's like the difference between a clear glass light bulb and one that is just installed on its own and lighting, versus putting a lampshade over it. The lampshade is diffusing that light, and what that's doing is it's preventing harsh shadows, and it's softening it a little bit, which we absolutely want for miniature photography. A big portion of that is we're going to be casting shadows. If it's too dark, too sharp, we're going to be casting shadows that don't actually exist, right? And that's not really what we're trying to do here, right? We want to make sure that we're keeping everything in focus, and we're illustrating this as as best as we can. So if you want to use a light box, they're great. I have had no real big issues. However, if you get, I think they're like $40 on Amazon, $30 on Amazon. If you get those cheap little ones, the lights are not very good. They like, you don't have any control. They're on off. They have little diffusers on them, but it's such a thick plastic that it then means you have to pull, like, it softens the light too much, and now you have to put the lights too close, and then you're just kind of going back and forth. And they say that uh, they have they're called the daylight bulbs. I don't actually think they are, without getting any type of testing equipment on it. I just don't find that they're very good quality. So the light box, fantastic. I would recommend using either your hobby lamp, especially if you've got a really good diffused light hobby lamp. Like, if you have the Red Grass Games one, I have that one task lamp that everybody gets, is like the standard. It's like the Neatfi or Nefty. I forget what it's called. That's a really good lamp because it's adjustable. And what I actually use photo lights. They're from a company called LoomCube. I really like them because they're portable little softbox lights that has like a little rubber gel on top of it to soften it out and stuff. And they're fully adjustable for temperature, for brightness. And you can get RGB ones if you wanted, so you can play around with color and things like that to add a little extra oomph and effect and stuff. It's really cool. But some general rules is we don't ever really want things to be super harsh angles and perpendicular. And what I mean is, like, at a 90-degree angle. We typically don't really want those for miniatures. When we start getting into like product photography, that's a little different because it's a little bit bigger and we're trying to illustrate something different. But a typical thing, rule of thumb, 45-degree angles, roughly, right? You can kind of play around with, how you like your lighting setups. If we have things that are in that harsh perpendicularity, you're gonna have the shadows get real stark. So if we just put an angle to them, it's just gonna soften them. I know some people, they like to use a single light, and I think they're wizards. I've never been able to get that to work. I like two, and then I do adjusting, right? So one might be a little bit brighter, one might be a little bit darker. I might adjust, pull them back, pull them forward, just to kind of show exactly what it is I'm trying to show. Fun little DIY hack: put a cheap white shirt or some tissue paper over top of your lamp to act as a quick little diffuser. The key is that it's got to be thin so the light can kind of go through. And you should have like a nice white glow with all of that. And you can get real crazy with it. You can get two lamps. You can put one coming from the top if you have a light box that it has like an opening for the top. You can really adjust. But the main thing is with all of this is this having that flexibility to adjust everything. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions in regarding to this? Cool. All right. Well, this is huge. I would say some of the biggest things that matter in our hobby. I am not big into trying to sell you a product or say like this has changed everything. Like, because no, it doesn't. Like, I really like this brush, but Jimmy over here might not like this brush, right? It doesn't work for him, right? So I'm a big believer in just trying things. There's a couple things though that I think that you should, if you're gonna sink some money into, there are two things in my opinion that you sink your money into, and that's a wet palette, and get a good one that you like, and lighting. You're gonna be sitting there painting for hours on end. If you have really cheap, crappy lighting, that's gonna affect your eyes. So having good lighting for your painting that should also apply to your photography as well. Again, you don't have to buy a separate set of lights just for photography. You can use, if you have a good enough lamp, play around with it, try it out. The biggest things I would say is, I would caution for the photo setup is adjustability, being able to turn the brightness up and down, and having it on like an adjustable arm so you can kind of play around with the distance and everything. My mouse died. Oh, there we go. All right. So, phone photography. I am. So I have a little joke with my friends that, uh, aside from me, my phone is my biggest critic. I don't know what it is, but my particular phone, whenever I go to take a photo of my own work, it decides you wanted everything to look yellow, right? And then it snaps the photo and everything looks yellow. Or it says, "Oh, everything is too dark or whatever. Let's make everything blown out and overexposed." But as soon as I grab someone else's mini, it goes, "Oh, finally. Oh, you got to take pictures of good work." And it does it just fine. So I get real frustrated with it, and so as a result, I haven't put a whole bunch of time into it. But I have put enough time into phone photography in general to know that just snapping a photo, especially for a miniature, is not ideal. Um, a lot of phone photography, it does a lot of automatic adjustments for you, based off of like information in normal photography, landscape, portraitures, blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff like that, right? So all of those things are going to adjust and tweak in a more favorable setting. But as soon as we start shrinking it down into miniatures, things start to get a little hectic and a little haywire. So I pull up these little screenshots here. Now, of course, when I did that, when I had these screenshots in for my last little thing, the iPhone has updated since then. So now you got to find them in different spots, but they all do look the same. I did confirm all of this, but one of the biggest things that people tend to neglect is this little guy right here, this focus box, along with this exposure slider. Okay. Um, Typically, it's going to start off right at middle, and then when you go to focus, it's going to auto adjust, and it's just going to make things way too bright or way too dark depending upon if your phone hates you or not. Typically, we want to adjust this exposure, so you're going to tap the screen into this exposure, and then this little sun will appear somewhere in the middle, and then before it disappears, just click and drag it down. Typically, and this is not all, but typically we want to lower it, because what it's trying to do is it's trying to show you the information. So it's going to automatically adjust the exposure to extremely bright. And we want to kind of temper that down a little bit. A really good thing is utilizing some sort of tripod as well, with like the little clamps and stuff. But the great thing about phones is they're rectangular and they're square. You can set them down and just very lightly hold it and just snap the photo. They also have timers that you can utilize, so that you're not having that shake and everything. Another thing too is on the iPhone you can swipe up, and I believe, let me grab my phone real quick. I believe now, yeah. So in the newest update for the iPhone, again, I can only speak on that one. It's in the top right corner, and it will show you a bunch of different things like the flash, exposure, things like that. So you're going to have extra settings there along with the timer. I think the timer is really, really beneficial. If you've got wireless headsets like some AirPods or whatever, you can actually take the photo with the AirPod, which is pretty sweet. You have a little remote. But those are some brief overviews to kind of dive into a little bit of phone photography there. I would highly recommend, if you are going to be using your phone, I would highly recommend that when you do the format, you do go into the settings, format into JPEG. RAW is going to give you much better photos, but then you've got to do like converting, and sometimes it doesn't play well with certain applications. So just doing it on a JPEG is perfectly fine. You're going to get a really good amount of information. It's going to be nice and sharp, but that's where lighting is going to be key. It all comes back to lighting for the most part. Lighting is probably the most important portion of it, no matter what camera that you are going to use. You can even add like little filters. Actually, this is a really fun little trip. This little thing right here indicates filters. I don't use any filters except for one, and that is the monochromatic black and white filter. And I really like doing that because you don't even have to take a photo and then change it into black and white. You can just turn on the filter in your camera right away. So you can actually look at your miniature and you can go and evaluate a little bit of like, oh, this doesn't look as bright as I thought it might. Right. So you can kind of get a little bit more accurate values of your work and stuff. And you can see, what's working and what's not, removing all of the color. Right. And I think that's a fun thing that you can kind of do to level up your work, and you really, really take time and evaluate. Um, I would highly recommend against Flash in all settings, just because if you don't know how to adjust the Flash appropriately or diffuse it appropriately, it's gonna cause you a headache. I just say turn it off. Don't even bother using it for the most part. Anyone got any questions in regards to like phone photography or just in general, really anything that cropped up? Sweet. All right, we're going to summarize this real quick with a little bit of a recap. All right, so here's our setting. Here's our target, right? This is a general target. What we're looking for this f-stop. We've got a nice tight f-stop. The aperture is fairly closed with the shutter speed itself fairly open and fairly slow. The ISO, this is about what our target is going to be. Every situation is going to be a little bit different. I would try to lean towards the 100 if you can, and then adjust up from there. But going beyond 400, it's a little risky. I forgot to talk about this in the lighting. So I put 5K to 5.5K angled and diffused. We talked about the diffused lighting. We talked about putting it at an angle, but I want to talk about this right here. This is 5 to 5,500 Kelvin. That has to do with the temperature of the light. It means that it is fairly white light with a little bit of yellow in it, and that is about the range that you're wanting to look for to approximate daylight. It's the healthiest for your eyes. It's going to give you the truest colors to what you would actually see in real life. Okay? Don't paint under warm yellow light like 3000. One, that'll probably put you to sleep because it's a very calming light. And you might fall asleep in your paint water and drown.
What?
Anything beyond 55, we're starting to get into really blue, very, very blue and white fluorescent lighting. And that just makes everything look really cold and unalive for the most part. So this is about what we're wanting to look at. So a couple keywords, if you don't remember the numbers of like 5,000 Kelvin or 5,500 Kelvin, is daylight. That's the main thing that you're wanting to look for. Is a daylight bulb. And if you are one big thing people will often do is they'll buy those IKEA lamps and buy a really nice high quality daylight bulb. You can get even those RGB daylight bulbs that are connected via Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and stuff, and then you can adjust it on the fly and stuff, which are pretty cool. So that's something to really take into consideration as well. It's going to be that much better for everything about your hobby. All right, dilation of your eyes, how quickly you blink, how much visual noise and light you can add to adjust, and then the creme de la creme, the lighting. Okay, and like I said, this is my approach. You might find other things, some helpful YouTube links that are very specific. I misspelled Squidmar. Specific to hobby photography, Treverion, Rogue Hobbies, Squidmar. I think Miniac even has one. I'm sure you can find a whole bunch of them, but these are really good resources just to kind of see how they do it. Everyone's gonna, like I said, everyone's gonna have a little bit of a different approach, and I would highly encourage you to look at others to see what it is that they're doing and learn a little bit more about this. Just because I want to see you guys. I want to see your guys' art and your guys' minis as you see them in hand, right? Because I'm not going to have that opportunity to see every single one of yours in hands. I mean, some of you I have been able to, and it's awesome, and I love it. But being able to illustrate that it's fantastic. And I will tell you this too: you're going to be playing around with this constantly. You're gonna tweak it. You're going to adjust. You're going to go back and forth and back and forth. I've gone back and forth. I've done all black backdrops. I've done all white backdrops, neutral gray. Like we're going to play around quite a bit with all this and find what works for you. And then the other thing too is that when you find something that works for you, share that with other people. None of this information that I'm giving you guys, I don't care. I want you guys to share with other people about like, hey, this is what's working for me, because I think that will help other people be able to fully appreciate and showcase their art. And that's huge for me. All right, now, do you guys have any questions with all of this stuff? I know I just kind of like lore dumped everything on you. Going once. What's that?
With the you say play with it. Well, if you haven't ever done really good pictures, how are you going to know that you got it good? I mean, is it just compared to the model and be like, yeah, that's exactly what the model looks like in my hand versus the camera, or is there?
Yes. So the short answer is yes. When I say you're like, hey, I don't have any experience with this, when I say play with it, it's compare to what you are seeing in real life and adjust from there. Okay. Take a photo. If you have a camera, it should be able to tell you all of the metadata, all of the different settings that you have, or just I have, I don't know, like 1,000 different notebooks floating around here. Write down what settings you're using, right? If you are playing around with the aperture right here and you go, okay, cool, I did an f8 aperture, right? And then, I adjusted my shutter speed and everything like that, but like something's not working right. It's not focusing in on everything properly. I wonder why it's happening. Have a little bit of a reference of it. Look at that photo, look at it in real life and see, okay, well, what's wrong? And then go, okay, if I know that according to this aperture scale, if I'm at f8, which is kind of smack in the middle, I might be letting in a little bit too much light. Let's try bumping it up to f11 or f14 or 18 or whatever, right? And then start seeing what it's going to, what it does. Cameras now have gotten so awesome in that, like, once you find out where the little buttons are or the little switches and levers are for your shutter speed, for your aperture, just go up and down until it looks better. Take a photo, look at it. This is looking a little bit got too much light in it or something like that. Maybe I'm a little too open. Let's keep narrowing it down. Oh, that looks really good, but it's really, really dark now. Now we go to shutter speed. We adjust. Well, that's because I'm at a 1/30th shutter speed. I need to let more light in. All right, let's try 1 second. Well, that's looking better. But like, I can only go so far with this old, hunk of junk camera or whatever. All right, let's take this, take the ISO. Let's bump it up to 200. See how we like it. See how we don't, right? And then when you kind of go, cool, I've got this sweet spot. 200 ISO worked for me. A 1 second shutter speed on a tripod and a f18 worked for me. Write that down. That's now your basis for the next mini. I'm going to tell you this too. The next mini you do, it might be bigger. It might have different colors. It's gonna shift. It's gonna change. You're gonna have to adjust from there. But if you don't remember what your values were for any of this type of stuff, now you're gonna start from square one and you're gonna experiment. All right. So when I say play with it, I truly do mean just cycle up to down to up. Figure out what looks good comparatively to in real life. Thought I saw some stuff in the chat. Oh my gosh, lots of stuff in the chat. I've seen the Rogue. Oh yeah, Soups. That the Rogue Hobbies one is actually really, really good. Now Rogue does do that composite photos, like photo stacking. I have done photo stacking before in a very different capacity, never for miniatures. I don't have any interest in that in my particular thing. However, it is fantastic tool to look into. I also don't have Photoshop. That's one of the easier ways to do photos, that kind of photo stacking composites. So that's not necessarily going to be there for everybody, but like it is a really, really cool thing. Oh, dope. Y'all are sharing a lot of good resources. That's fantastic. All right. So you guys are probably sick and tired of looking at this damn slideshow. So let's go ahead and stop sharing that. Let's see. Camera. Oh, I should turn it on. Ha! Okay. So I wanted to show you guys.
I got a question.
Yes.
If we could. Yes. Hello. Question. I work with a photo room app, which I use for mostly background removal, which works quite well with my harsh lights. I use the standard black background. The harsh lights give a nice lighting and a crisp outlining of the miniature in general.
Oh, cool.
But I was wondering, what would be your advice to work with background removal? Like a black backdrop obviously enhances bright colors. That was my idea. So when I use bright colors and use a white background, then everything got swallowed and nobody can see anything, and the picture gets a little busy and diffuse to determine the details or the outlining and the whole miniature in total. So
Yeah.
what would you suggest when working with some tools like the background removal apps?
Yeah. So first and foremost for me, I want to try to give myself as much ease of use as possible. So that's why I think having a backdrop that is it's similar colors. I don't like using crushed velvet unless you get real expensive because it tends to reflect a little too much. So honestly, I like to get construction paper or matte black poster board and stuff like that. So what I'm doing is I'm giving myself from the get go more a cleaner and crisper outline. So when you're utilizing those softwares, I personally don't, but when you're utilizing those softwares, what I would try to make sure to do is keep all of that in mind with your backdrop and such, and try to put your focus on the light focus on the miniature, so that the backdrop then fades away. Um, I use I've even used I've used like Photoshop and Lightroom and things like that. The cleaner of a backdrop that you have, meaning you have less information in the backdrop and that it is just one solid general color, makes it that much easier for you to like remove said backdrop. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think so. Since my setup is a little restricted regarding space and such, because I make my pictures or I take the pictures all with my phone. So it's like then and there at the spot, I'm done with painting. I take the picture. The light is usually, I adjust the lighting so it's not too bright, but it's mostly directly frontal.
Sure.
And then I take the picture, because the cell phone tends to darken a little bit and flips me off every time I have the perfect lighting for actually having a normal photo, and the cell phone still darkens the photo, which is annoying.
Yeah.
So I adjust by just putting the lamp in front of me, basically, and then click, and then I hope the focus is well enough, is good enough. But it's a little crude. But I was wondering if there was something to improve, if I wanted to use something else other than the black backdrop. I mean, the app gives you many options. The standard is white, gray, and black. So far, I used black most of the time because I use bright colors. As I said, I wanted to put emphasis on the bright colors so they don't get swallowed by the white backdrop. But so basically, I did everything wrong, then everything right because I used the light frontal, frontal lighting. So the black works actually well. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think
So,
I
so
think
a
I'm
little
set.
bit more on that is when you do have frontal lighting, especially with a backdrop, right? Here, let me move my microphone a little bit. Can y'all still hear me? We're all still good? Okay.
Yes, yes,
Um,
can hear.
Perfect. All right. So I have a tunnel and I have a backdrop. Okay. So um, in regards to the frontal lighting, right? So if I were to take these lamps and I were to blast them forward, do one single one this way, what we're doing is we end up projecting too much light into this backdrop right here. Okay, which is why pulling it off to an angle, or if because of space, which I understand, instead of shooting it at a light like this, bring it up a little bit more. And you're going to reduce the amount of light available on the back of the backdrop. The other thing, too, is don't shoot the miniature right here, exactly by the back of the backdrop. Because what happens is you can kind of start to see these little shadows start poking out. And we're now trying to reach with the light all the way back here, which means we're now evenly lighting the backdrop. Ideally, we want to pull this mini way forward so that this starts to just kind of disappear. You notice how it's a lot softer back here? Right? That's what we want to kind of keep as much as we possibly can. That's just going to do us more favors. If we've got to remove the backdrop, we can do that much more easily because it's a solid color, and we can utilize tools like Photoshop or like Lightroom or these other apps to intelligently get rid of said color if we needed to, do some cool photoshopping if we wanted to put it into different backdrops. I would highly advise against any of the backdrops. Remember, I don't know how it is in other countries or even other states, but when growing up in the 90s, we had those terrible backdrops right here that had the little splotchy colors and stuff like that. I would highly avoid those in this particular scenario because you've got too many different colors in there and you're having to kind of like adjust accordingly. The other thing too is with the backdrop here is I don't have this backdrop. I don't have it at any type of angle. So I got a nice big piece of art construction paper. I have it pinned up against the wall right here, and I have it draped to get what's called an infinity edge. Okay. Now this looks really bad, but the nice thing is that if I zoom out a little bit, now I'm on my tripod right now, but typically my camera is somewhere right in here. If we have this really soft infinity edge, it's going to allow the light to just kind of dissipate and fade and die a little bit because the focus should be right here, right where that miniature is. So I have two different things for my photography on all this, and it depends on what I'm trying to do. I personally really like black or gray because I feel like it gives the truest colors. I think white tends to be a little challenging, especially at the miniature scale. But if you have something that's white that works for you, it works for you. Does anybody have any questions before I kind of start moving on with a little bit more stuff? It was a great question though. Post processing is always a bit of a challenge because everyone's going to do it a little differently. Nada? You guys hate me? Just kidding. I'm looking at the chat now. Yearbook backdrops. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I really like this big piece of construction paper. I just went to an art store. I got the biggest piece of gray construction paper that I could find. You can get them in black. You can get them in white as well. But the main thing is we want them to be fairly matte. If you have a piece of paper or something that will work in this because it's big enough, but it's just a little bit too shiny, hit it with a dull coat, hit it with a matte coat, let it really properly dry, and that will help basically, I don't know, phrase it. It'll help eat the light so your focus starts being pulled towards the actual miniature here. Okay. You can see right here on all of these that I have, they're basically clamped to my desk. And the nice thing is I can adjust any of these. I can pull them away. I can adjust any of these clamps here to compensate for smaller or larger miniatures. The nice thing I like about these things too, let me see if I can zoom it in, zoom it in. Ooh, I've got a little dial right here. Maybe I can show you right there. It's all backwards, but you can kind of see that I'm adjusting the temperature or the brightness right here. I have it set up to pure daylight at 55, 56. And then there's a little lever right here that I can adjust. Right? So I typically never do it at 100%. I'm usually somewhere in between 70% down to 40. And again, that just depends. So what I typically like to do, I like typically keep them both around 60 and I adjust from there. Okay. Pull this way. Now, I have this fun little tunnel here. It's nice and janky. But the nice thing is when I've got my camera right in here and I adjust my lighting just so, I pull the miniature somewhere you have to find a little bit of a sweet spot here. What's really cool is because it's all black on all of these sides, and what this is just foam core board that I used a ruler, a knife, and some tape. And I basically just cut equal sections on all sides and tape them together. And don't forget to put something on the back as well. So you've got basically, it just eats away at the all of the light. And then I even hit it with a little bit of a matte varnish in certain areas on the inside. And what that does is we put all of the light on the miniature, everything else, and we put all the light, the focus, we zoom in, we literally bring the camera, sometimes I'll bring the camera right, like pretty much like right here. So all I'm seeing is here. And because of that, because I'm putting so much focus on this, like your eyes would do, we're going to automatically adjust. Your camera is adjusting as well. And it literally tunes out all of this extra information of the black backdrop. And it, like, quote unquote, turns it off, if that makes sense. So I wanted to show you guys this, and I'm actually going to play around with making another one at a future date. I went to the hobby store this morning, and they were out. Really bummed. I cut this a little bit too short for some of my taller and bigger projects. So I want to basically redo this one so it's a little bit taller, a little bit bigger. And then for some of like the really big, like maybe a diorama or like a larger tank and stuff, I just pop this off and I take it with this right here. Okay. So getting some foam core. Let me move the mini. You can kind of see all I've done. I just take my ruler and I measure out. I think I did about 12 inches on either side. And I just scored, snapped, cut it, and then I just taped it along all of the edges to basically tape it along the edges to like line up just right to give it that nice square, kind of rectangular edges. The most important thing that we want to do though with this is we want to keep it nice and long. We don't want it really, really short and truncated, because what's going to happen is the light is going to just bounce like crazy on all of the surfaces. We want the light to be focusing on the mini, not the box, not the backdrop. So having your miniature accordingly positioned further or closer from the backdrop, or more shallow or deeper down this tunnel, is going to affect the finished result. Does that make sense? questions at all?
I have a question.
Yes.
When you make your light box that you made there, does the color of the light box matter as long as it is a solid color? Because I've seen people do white, I've seen a yellow, I've seen black, and I've seen gray.
So the color does matter, because those colors are going to, in some particular way, influence the lighting, influence what's going to be shown on the miniature. I would highly recommend against a colored one, like a yellow, for example. In color theory and color composition, yellow is the most luminous, which means it basically like emits or reflects the most or refracts the most light. So any light that touches on the yellow, that yellow is then gonna accidentally put some bounce light and yellow cast onto your model. So I'd avoid yellow. I would just stick towards a dark neutral, dark gray, mid gray, black. I've seen white before. I think that is totally appropriate. I just find for me, white is a little bit. I struggle with white a little bit when photographing with it. Just because the settings you need to shift a little bit, the lighting needs to be changed a little bit, and the colors don't quite look as rich as what they do in person. That's just what I tend to favor. So I would highly recommend something that is matte black. We can kind of pull up here. It's fairly matte, nothing too glossy or shiny. And then I did hit it with a bit of a matte coat. Same thing with the construction paper. You can get some pretty damn good photos with this little rinky-dink setup. It doesn't take a whole lot, which is, I think, is fantastic, because I had a light box and I had to do all these. I thought I had to do all these things, but I ended up giving that away to the local store and kind of doing it this way. And I find that it just it performs better. And the nice thing is because I didn't spend a ton of money on it. Like I spent $4 on the foam core and about 15 minutes to cut everything up, tape it all up. Right? I could do it again. And no problem. Rather than thinking like, oh crap, now I gotta buy a new light box and this, that, and the other. The other thought that I just had in regards to having colors, play around with it, with having maybe some color. So one of the things that I've done before in photography is having little cards of color. So you can kind of sneak in like almost like an index card that's, red or blue or yellow or something like that you can kind of sneak in there to kind of give it a little bit of extra oomph. If you're wanting to go for something a little bit more clever, a little bit more creative, totally fine. But the basis and the core construction of everything, in my opinion, I would want it to be neutral. Because at the very least, you have a really solid foundation to fall back on. That makes sense? All right, so in the chat, give me just a second. I am going to add a couple of photos in the chat to show you the difference between utilizing this light box and utilizing the backdrop. Okay, so, I really has struggled with this particular piece, but I think it came out well photograph-wise. So these first two are in this light box, this little tunnel, okay? So I want you guys to, all right, there we go, that's it. I want you guys to look at those. All of that, all of the color that you see and everything is all me adjusting like a madman, adjusting the positioning of the light, going up and down on the light, pulling it further back, pulling the camera, right? I'm using my phone as a facsimile for the camera, pulling my camera further and closer away. And it's a lot of this different adjustment. Take a miniature itself, and instead of putting it right here, putting it deeper down the tunnel, Okay. I also have this little super dusty right now, but this little turntable that I like to use because once I kind of have it where I want it to be, I want to press a button and it will literally rotate the model, press the button again and stop so that I don't have to keep screwing around with it. But that's me moving and adjusting. I did not delete any of the background. I didn't need to, right? All right, Soups, enough trolling. He said, "Oh yeah, I see what you mean about your phone making things look yellow. Hardy har har." So, yeah. So those should be like a bit of a proof of concept for this. Sorry, give everybody freaking vertigo here. Should be a proof of concept in that, like, if you capture it just right and you don't have any light shooting directly into the back, and you have them more at an angle, you have them instead of being front on at an angle, and they're slightly off to the side at an angle. What that's going to do is it's going to just take that backdrop, and it's all of that backdrop is just going to slowly fade away. Okay. Now here's a couple that I did with the backdrop. And I want you guys to notice a couple things. And I actually want you guys to see what the difference is. So I want to illustrate this real quick. Okay. This is the same model. This is the exact same lighting, the exact same settings. Okay. I didn't touch anything except for turning the model. Okay. What's different?
Backdrop seems to be brighter than
Close.
in the second photo. It's yellowish, beige.
There it is. The temperature is different. Yes. The bottom one is warmer for whatever reason, and the top one is cooler, right? Because I'm in real life, it's really hard to see what color, these are right here. It is more true to life to the first photo, right? But what happened? Okay? That is the age-old freaking question. Looking at the colors available from the top photo and the bottom photo, like on the actual miniature, there's a lot more magenta and pink on the top one. So the camera is automatically adjusting light balances to compensate as a result. The second photo has a lot more yellow and white and blue in it, and I like turquoisey blue. So it's naturally adjusting the white balance as a result as well. Okay. So even in the exact same setting, these photos were taken a minute or two apart. And so you're gonna have these little things where you go like, what the hell happened? What changed? What shifted itself? This is part of the process. It's part of playing around to see what works, what doesn't work, what you like, what you don't like. And I will show then one more. Two more, I mean. This one was nice because it was a lot, the colors were a little bit more balanced and stuff, but this was done on just the backdrop. It just kind of fades away. Let me see if I can find one that not on the backdrop, or was on a different backdrop. Let's see if this works. Okay. So this is not the best of the best paint job. It's just a crummy little squirrel night that I did in a couple hours. But if you look at the difference. Like if you zoom in on the little squirrel guy, you can actually see that crushed velvet. You guys can actually see the material that it's on, that it's resting on. Does anyone want to hazard a guess as to why that is? We touched on it. Any takers? It's because the light was forward facing, like this. and it was on not above the level, it was at the exact same level as the miniature. So it was catching a metric ton of light all at the bottom. And then also that material is that like crushed velvet tends to reflect a little bit too much light for mini photography in my experience. So that was that's kind of like a big issue in my opinion with all that. Now you could very much extract that, take it out, drop the backdrop or everything like that, and it's not terrible, it's not super egregious, but when you're trying to illustrate and showcase something, like you want to showcase the thing, not the thing that it's on, if that makes sense. So Soups, you did say you can see the shadow under its neck. That had to do with the way that the lighting was, right? I didn't have these ones at the time. I had a big light bar that was literally just right here like this at this kind of angle. It was slightly angled up, but not really, but just basically blasting too much light right in front of it. And so it caused a little bit of weird shadows. I didn't have anything to eliminate the shadows, which is why I have since shifted to doing 2, because I can kind of soften and eliminate those shadows. Like that's a great catch. So any questions? I want to hear from you guys about your guys' experience.
I got another one.
Yeah,
I got
absolutely.
another one. Regarding lighting, how do you work with true metallic colors? I see your pictures and they are awesome. And right now it occurs to me that I should start practicing non-metallic metal, because when you take a picture, you avoid reflection from the metal.
Oh boy, the $1 million question.
If you know what I mean.
Yes, I do.
And I took some pictures and from an earlier piece, and I noticed that the lighting was reflecting on the trim of the armor pieces, and it looked nice actually. It looked like I did a non-metallic metal job, but it wasn't. So it was actually a fake, and I thought, okay, it looks nice, but it's wrong. It's too bright. But if I dim the light, then it gets too dark. So how do you work with metallic colors?
Yes. So I always tell people learning about non-metallic metal tends to break people's brains. Okay. And I get it, right? It takes a lot of plotting and it takes a lot of light understanding. Okay. Because I often tell people when you're doing non-metallic, you're not actually painting non-metallic, you're painting the light and you're putting where the light is going to be. When you're photographing metallics though, woof. I understand your struggle. So when you're painting metallics to high degrees, now that we're going to say this, take this with a grain of salt. If you're painting it to like, hey, this is my centerpiece. So I just posted a commission that I did of this this Imperial Knight that I did. What you want to do is you want to paint with non-metallic metal type principles, and you want to put the focus where it needs to be, which means things need to get brighter and darker accordingly. So if we look at the first photo of that Imperial Knight and we look at the metallic work on it, if you see on that, I don't know what it's called, the carapace there that leading towards his face, how we can see that like really strong light presence right in the middle and then it kind of fades off, that is actually painted and the light is capturing it. Fun tip, I like to take all of those little shadowed areas and I matte them down. I don't, people think that I'm going to paint with metallics and just metallics. I'm going to paint with non-metallics and paint with just that. Mix them in together. I put metallics, secret sauce here, I will put metallics or even fluorescence into my non-metallics. I will put non-metallics into my metallics. So, one little thing to keep in mind with all this is going to focus. No. Okay, let's see if we can't do this. Anything that is on a top facing or that is forward facing is going to get the most amount of light, which means you should make it nice and bright. Anything on the bottom, though, notice how it doesn't quite reflect nearly as much. And this is a really terrible example. But then as I start turning it up towards the top of the model, we start to see it catch more metallic light. If I turn it around, it starts to get a little bit darker, okay? I literally matte. I use a matte, typically a matte wash, where I will take a little bit of this brown ink or a brown wash, mix it in with a couple drops of matte varnish, and I will spray or glaze that on with a brush. With metallics, especially on a higher degree, we want to control the shine, which in my opinion makes metallics really difficult to photograph. If you're just like, hey, I just want to do my army, I'm not trying to put 30 hours into the metallics alone on each guy, my advice would be to still incorporate similar things. Like this is just like a little trench crusade dude. Still want to control things, but we just be a little bit bigger and a little bit more broad with it. Let's see. I can't find. This might be illustrative for it. Got this guy. He's got a little Zweihander. Okay. So you can see the wrinkles in the waves in the sword. Each of the tops of the ridges of the waves right here, I paint with an extremely bright metallic. There we go. And then if I turn it this way, look at it, just doesn't really even shine almost at all. Have you noticed that? But when I turn it this way, it shines really, really hard. I'm just controlling the focus. So that means all on this side, I do a little bit of matte varnish or matte paint mixed in, or a matte like wash. And then over here on this side, I just layer like I would normally layer, and I just make it a little bit brighter in the areas that I want to focus. This side looked identical. This side right here, I took 3 minutes to do. This here, I took 15 minutes to do. I just added more and more metallic shine. So like when you turn it around and when you rotate it, it's kind of got that little bit of swing and shine. Does that make sense? So it can start very quickly with your paint job, is literally controlling the shine, utilizing matte varnishes and matte paints and stuff to just say, I want this to not catch as much light. Great question. Metallics they're a bear. They really can be to photograph too. Especially if you got something like Stormcast Army, for example, where it's like a ton of metallics. Honestly, a big thing is start pulling your lights, either darkening them down or pull them further away until you can kind of get it a little bit more accurately to what you're trying to convey and what you're trying to look at. Any other questions? I kind of want to open it up to the floor for people. Just like ask questions, like give me some thoughts or feedback on like, or just, hey, I've been struggling with X, Y, or Z, or ask how my day is going. It doesn't matter. I just want a little bit of interactivity, a little bit of involvement,
So it's been a few years since I messed with an actual camera and transferred data from a camera to a computer. Has it gotten easier? Because
oh my gosh.
That's the reason I use my phone, is it's just like, oh, right there, it's on my phone, I upload on there and all that. I haven't screwed around with cameras recently.
True. So, okay, yes, my old camera was a pain in the ass, and because I also have a Mac, an updated Mac, I don't have an SD card slot, or I didn't have an SD card slot, so then I had to like get an adapter, it was a nightmare. I just got a Sony, what is it? A Sony A6100 mirrorless camera. Cost about $750 for the body. It was just like a little kit lens. It's nothing incredible, right? This one has a wireless transfer to my phone, which is incredible. I can literally go into the settings and I can click open up Wi-Fi connection on my phone. I literally have this Image Mobile app right here. Oh, it just updated. And it will import all of those images here for me. And I just start the connection, hit import. Within seconds, it goes straight to my phone. I can adjust, I can look at it, and it's like, oh, awesome. So it has gotten easier. Now, if you have an older camera, right, it's not going to necessarily have all of those types of things. I would highly recommend, no matter if you're using a camera, you're using a phone, shoot in the JPEG setting, because it makes that transfer that much easier. So you're not having to do any type of conversion and such. Also, if you're just gonna post on Instagram, the web based on a computer Instagram app, not terrible. It's not ideal, but instead of taking it, putting it on your computer with the SD card, and then downloading it, transferring it to your phone or whatever, you can post from your computer now, which may not necessarily be appealing for everybody, but it is like a nice little extra step that's been removed. I'm in the Apple ecosystem. I can hear people hissing, booing and hissing now. I can airdrop now. So from my computer, once it's in my computer, I can airdrop it to my phone and vice versa. So that's that is a step that has been severely shortened as well. So that is really, really nice. I don't think that exists for PCs, unfortunately, which is kind of a bummer. How do I find the chat? There we go. Dope. Oh, Elijah struggles every day. Yeah, I struggle every day too. Okay. A diffuser of some variety will help. It will soften the light. Yeah, prevent harsh reflections. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even just a paper towel can sometimes do the job as a diffuser. That's a really, really good idea. Soups, I can share what I'm taking away from this. Biggest things by far, since the triangle of options are very limited on my iPhone, the damn exposure option, and using a timer, I would definitely be putting those to the test. Yeah, no, that's perfect. You are going to need to kind of like adjust, right, accordingly, depending upon what phone you have, what the capabilities it have. But here's one little tip that I would say is let's try to reduce the amount of things that you got to tweak. Okay, so let's start from big to small, right? The big elephant in the room is all of this. If you don't have the space, you have to set this up, set these things up, charge them, set up everything, right? That takes a lot of time to do, and that will honestly take a lot of motivation out of photographing your finished mini. Shit. Well, he's armless. So that's a big factor in all this, right? Once you have this set up, whether it is that you have the setup portion of this down so that doesn't take a lot of time, or you have a small dedicated space. I mean, this is like 18 inches by 24 inches. It's not a whole lot of room, but I make it work. Then we start adjusting the lighting. Right, now that this is no longer a factor, let's figure out where our basis is. I've found that 60% on both of these right here at this kind of like downward 45-degree angle tends to work the best for me. That is now something that I don't have to think about too much. And now it lets me think more about the stuff on the camera. Okay. Now in my camera, now I'm like, sorry to give you some headaches. Now I'm figuring out what's the zoom, how I focus, where's my shutter speed and aperture and such. That way I can focus more on the camera. I can focus more on those individual settings. If I know that I typically like to shoot at a 1.5 second shutter speed, I might just keep it there and then adjust otherwise. So now that's one less thing for me to manage. Does that make sense? So to go off with what Soups was saying, the triangle of options are very limited. That actually could be a good thing because it shortens the scope of work that you're having to do, if that makes sense. And that I typically like try to tackle things one bit at a time, one thing at a time, one setting at a time, just so it doesn't overwhelm you, because this has the very real possibility of overwhelming. I think of it kind of like painting. Once you kind of understand how to prep and do your paint properly, you're no longer thinking about it. It's second nature. Now you're learning how to do these very specific styles of blends. Well, now you've done those for 100 hours. You're like, okay, I don't need to think about doing this anymore. I'm just going to do it, right? All of that process is still very much the same for photography. I love the gifts, by the way. Those are great. Oh man. Okay. Yeah. Any questions or any thoughts or like just anything? That doesn't have to be a specific question. It can just be like, hey, I've got this issue with this type of what I'm doing with photography, and maybe we kind of like iron it out. The floor is yours. I broke the little guy. Oh well. If there's no other questions or anything like that, we can kind of close it off. Thank you guys for showing up. I really do appreciate you guys showing up, and I hope you guys got a little bit of value out of this. I will talk with Meg about maybe the slides are not very helpful. The slides are more for me, but I have a little like a document that maybe we can kind of put as like a free resource for people to kind of go back to. It's the same content. It elaborates just a touch more because it's like a Google Doc or something like that. So that way we can have the recording of this to reference, as well as like a physical, thing to read and stuff like that.
Both, please.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I'd love to be able to do that. And here's the most important thing before I let y'all leave. Please play around with this, and I expect y'all to flood me with tags on a before and after. I would love to see that kind of stuff. Here was a photo that I took before and after some of this, learning and experimenting with this, and here's one after. I would love to see that. And as best as I can give you little bits of advices to just kind of say, oh, like tweak this, tweak that, and hopefully get your guys' minis into tip-top shape. Are y'all harassing me? Yeah. I'll paint the Black Knight. I love it.
Thank you for the class, Devin. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I hope everybody got some value out of it. Good luck on your guys' journey and just in mini painting and photography and everything like that. I will say this too. When I first started painting, I thought like I'm just gonna be painting, but now I've had to learn how to paint and how to airbrush and how to photograph and figure out printing and sculpting. And I'm like, I just thought it would be one thing, and now it's many things. So I get the potential anxiety that some people might have about all this. Just know I've been there, and it's going to be all right, and you're going to make some awesome stuff as a result.